Hi everyone, welcome back. We're enjoying really autumnal weather up here now in West Yorkshire. Windy yesterday, light rain overnight, but the sun's come out and the birds are in fine form this morning. And I thought I'd take the opportunity in this update just to show you how we're getting on with the no-dig plot, 2 years on from when it was first started. Well, as I mentioned, the no-dig plot was started about 2 years ago. We took it on in the summer of 2016, and if you look, you can see there are 8 no-dig beds and there's a large no-dig border, and that's directly behind me. And at the end of 2016, this bed here at the back of me had a foot of manure, and then 5 or 6 months later we planted squash into that. At the end of 2017 we put about another foot of manure on, but it wasn't well rotten manure. It was probably a month, 2 months old, but again it had 5 or 6 months to rest, to break down in time to plant squash, the dahlias, some purple sprouting broccoli and a few beets as well. Burpee's golden beetroot and Bolt Hardy beetroot. So I'm going to turn the camera around now and we'll take a look at the condition of the border, just so that you can see how rapidly you achieve a really nice bed. Okay, so I'll turn you around. It's a little bit easier to see the condition of the bed now because 2 or 3 days ago my cousin and I removed all the courgette plants, and we had rather a lot in there, but they did provide good ground cover. I think we had 5 yellow courgette and 4 lime green. They're very, very productive. Took about a dozen courgettes off just before we took the plants out. But we can take a look now at the condition of the soil. And the one thing that's conspicuous really is the absence of any kind of weed. And as I say, this has been mulched twice. If you were to remove the top 2 or 3 inch, you'd see that the previous year's manure, fresh manure, is broken down into a fine soil, and the soil beneath that, the original soil, which was covered by cardboard and straw and manure, that's all nice and soft as well. There may be a few bricks in there, who knows, because we never turned it to find out. As I say, we just covered it with cardboard and manure. So absolutely no weed, and I think the last time I went round and weeded was prior to planting the squash, and it only took about 30 minutes or so. It didn't take very long at all, and that would have been probably towards the end of May. We're now approaching the end, just past the middle of September, so that's June, July, August, September. That's 4 months, and there's not a weed in sight, I don't think. There is just over there. You can see there's the start of a thistle, and that's because that little border there just had a thin mulch of maybe 2 or 3 inch of fresh manure, and you can see there are some weeds that have started to come through that, but they'll be easy to remove. But the rest of it is clean, and that's partly down to the plants that we've put in here. When you've only got access to fresh manure and you start a no-dig bed or border like this, or a no-dig allotment, you have to make use of what you've got. So you put cardboard down, that's generally free. If you can get hold of fresh manure, that's okay as well, but clearly you can't plant straight into it. But if it's left for 6 months, then you can start in your first year with, as we did, squash, pumpkin. We also put some onions in as well, because by then all of the compost had started to break down. It was a good 6 months old, and by the time the onions, and we also put beetroot as well in, by the time they came to maturity, the fresh compost, what was fresh compost, was probably 9-10 months old, so there's no risk of contaminating the food that we were harvesting. So a clean bed. Now I'll just show you a little bit at the side of the greenhouse where we didn't mulch properly, and you can see how the weeds have taken hold. I'm sat down on my trusty bench now and enjoying a minute, but I'm taking this opportunity to look at the area in front of the blueberry bed. We've got lavender here, and you can see that there's hardly any weed in this little bit in front of me. There's a tiny little bit, there might be a few nettles just popping through, but this area, like the one that I just pointed to that had the weeds, this had about 3 inch of fresh compost, that's all, and that would have been again about 4 months ago. Probably the last part that hadn't been covered. But on the left side of the path, just here, I never got round, it's about 3 square metres or so, I never got round to putting any manure on. Other things took priority. I did do the other side of the greenhouse where we've got the Crown Prince squash, but at this side never got round to it. Perhaps by the time I got the time to do it, the lavender plants were too big anyway, so it's just been left. And you can see there's a nice thick smattering of weeds of every description really all the way across, and that's with quite a bit of cover from the lavender, so you can see the weeds have not really extended underneath the plants, but around the edge where there's been no mulch, no manure mulch, they've taken hold quite nicely. And it would have been much worse if it had been in open ground and the soil had been turned. This soil hasn't been turned probably for, well, never. In my 5 years down here, the previous plot holders didn't turn the soil. They had a few beds, but that was it. So that's without any tillage of the soil, and the soil simply unmulched for 4 months. Before we move on to look at the raised beds that are no dig, just look at the things that we've grown in this bed this year, which are not dissimilar from last year. We're looking at the butternut squash hunter here, and you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just about ripe fruits, and then there's one rather large yet to ripen slightly green striped fruit, and an even bigger one just at the other end. And the 2 bigger ones were thrown out towards the back end of the summer, and surprisingly they're massive, and I think that's probably to do with the rainfall that we've had in the last month, 6 weeks. And you can see the butternut squash foliage is still quite lush. Just look to the right here, you'll see I had some beetroot, modulus on beetroot left over, and this went into the ground, and it's not started to form. Oh, it has. Yeah, there are a few beets forming. I think this is the Burpees Golden, but these were spare. I'd planted up everything I wanted to, and I just thought, well, I'll just stick them in the no dig border. So as soon as they get to a reasonable size, I'll pick 1 or 2 out, and then the others might continue to grow on. So you can see, even though we've just got what looks like a still fairly fresh manure, everything's growing just fine. I put some alpine strawberries in there, and they've done okay. We had lots of those this year. Another butternut squash, same thing again. The last fruit's yet to ripen, but it's slightly bigger than the other ones. And there's one over there, 2 in fact. There are 3 larger fruits. Dahlias went in this year for the first time, and they've thrived after deadhead them because they've been a little bit neglected. More butternut squash and more butternut squash. We'll have about 30 of these. But then on the large section of border by the sunflowers, this is where we had the Ushiki curry, and you can see that the foliage on this variety of squash dies back more quickly, but it's very, very dense during the middle of the summer. And I've not ventured into that area at all. I've not trodden on it, walked into it, weeded it, done anything. There might be an odd strand of grass that's encroached from the lawn area there on the side, but the rest of it, as far as I can see, looks completely free of weed again. And then at the back, some purple sprouting broccoli, and that should be ready around about April time. It was a little bit late last year, but then we had that long winter. So you can see there again, the ground is in good condition. It's tolerating plants that are producing lots of nitrogen rich foliage, and all it is 2 foot of fresh manure that's been allowed to rot down over 2 years. Nothing more, nothing less. And dahlias again here, so they look nice. Right, so we'll take a look at the larger beds, the raised beds. We've got 3 small ones at the front that have just about been cleared now, and we've got 4 of the larger ones at the back, and they are what I would describe as lasagna beds. Looking at the first bed, we've got kohlrabi, and some of it's a little bit too big to eat now. It's a little bit woody, but again, if you look at the condition of the soil around the plants, it's virtually free of weed. Now this has been weeded, probably I don't know, maybe once or twice, but it probably taken a few minutes each time, and that weed was probably caused simply by separating the soil to put in the plantlets. This bed had the sweet corn this year, and if you look back through some of the earlier videos on this plot, you'll see how these beds were put together. I'll try and create a playlist so that you can follow the development of the plot. So by all means, have a look at that. Some of the videos are a little bit long, but that simply reflected the process of layering up the beds when I built them. But it's been very, very productive, this approach, the lasagna bed approach. I know it's an approach that Andy, I can't remember his tag for his YouTube channel. It's something like 260676, something like that. Yeah, so he takes this approach this time of year. He layers up his beds, and you don't have to do it all at once either. So you know, as you clear a bed, get it covered up. In this instance, I've used stable bedding from the surrounding paddocks, and you can see there's a horse over there. I'm lucky in that regard because I've probably got about half a dozen horses surrounding me. So stable bedding, and I'm going to put some green matter on there because on one of the other plots I've got a few greyhound cabbage heads that have blown, and there's probably enough already to cover one of these beds. I'll just chop it and put it on top, and then I'll maybe top it off with some spent compost from the tomato pots that are in the greenhouses. And I've made a particular effort this year with the tomatoes to remove any tomatoes that have dropped onto the top of the pots, the soil, so that the spent compost is not contaminated with tomato seeds, because you only need 1 tomato and then you get thousands of seeds. So, but yeah, so straw, green matter, manure if you've got it, or spent compost, and then cover it up with some black plastic. We're now in the middle of September. If, let's say, next year we put dwarf French beans in this bed in the middle of May, we're looking at 8 months. There's 8 months for this bed to break down. Now, when I did the very first bed over here, I think it only had about 5.5 months, and I couldn't believe it at the time that it had gone from a mishmash of straw, manure, soil, rock dust, worm casts, hay, what else do we put in there? Green matter, you name it, it went in. After 5.5 to 6 months, this bed had completely broken down. You know, there were spent hops in there as well, and I think that was about the only layer that had not completely broken down. But the soil was really fine, dense but fine, and I grew carrots successfully for the very first time in this bed. And I think I videoed this bed being layered up, and you'll find that. as I say, in the playlist. This one's now got carrots in, and they've done well again this year. A little bit slower to fill up because of the warm weather. But I probably need to stick a sign in this bed, as you can see, because the rabbits in this area clearly are not subscribers to this YouTube channel. Because if they had been, they'd have realised that it was no dig, and as you can see, they've dug it all out. And I don't think that, I know for a fact they've not come out here. They've started it all here. I looked the other day and they'd gone in about 5 or 6 inch, and the little blighters have come back and tried to carry on digging, so that's going to get filled up, and I'm just going to thwart, frustrate their efforts. But you can see the condition of the soil. Granted, they've churned it a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with that soil, and you can still see a little bit of the layering there of the spent hops. If I just point to it just there, but that's not stopped anything growing through it. And one of the other things as well that I thought I'd mention about this process of creating a lasagna bed is the use of manure, because people are often advised not to grow carrots in beds that have been manured at the end of the previous season. Well, if you've watched Charles Dowding's videos, you'll have heard him say, well, that's really only a problem if your manure's dug in to the ground, so you create pockets of high fertility and low fertility, and it's that causes the carrots or parsnips to fork. If it's layered on top, it's generally not a problem, and you can sow into that fine manure. But in this instance, we had layers of manure, and I think there might have been 2 layers at different sections of the layering up. Over the course of the next 6 months, all of the layers broke down, including the manure layers, and when I grew carrots in this bed, they were the first crop in the first season. There was no sign of any forking at all. All the carrots were really, really nice. So again, there's another myth there that's partly dispelled by this approach, the lasagna bed approach. So you can throw everything in here, let it rot down, and it shouldn't really create a problem for root veg in the subsequent season. So they are the 4 large no-dig beds, and they're still looking rather nice, I think, at this late stage of the year. We're still cropping from them. I've got a few kohlrabi to take, lots of carrots, and I'll continue to layer these beds up. And as I say, I've probably got another month and a half to continue and finish that layering up. So if I get it finished by the end of October, we're still left with a good 6 months for it to break down, which should be enough. Well, that's enough talk about the no-dig beds and borders. I just thought I'd show you briefly before I leave the inside of the no-dig plot greenhouse. This is a 10 by 6 greenhouse, and it's had beefsteak tomatoes in it this year, and they're almost finished, but with a bit of luck we might continue to be eating tomatoes for the next 2 weeks fresh, and then there might be a week or so where tomatoes on the windowsill ripening up at home. Looking at the Japanese black trefoil now, and this has done really well this year, and one of the good things about this plant is, apart from tasting really, really nice, the tomatoes are slow to ripen, so you get a gradual ripening across all of the trusses. As you can see, there are trusses at the bottom there that are yet to ripen, and the same could be said for the trusses all the way up the plant. Some of the other plants have just about been completely stripped or removed, but there are still a few others. There's a few brandy boys and pink Berkeley tie-dyes. They're quite nice when they're sliced and you look inside them. And then we've got this one bonus plant at the back, a self-sown one. The seed has obviously fallen between the woven fabric on the floor and the base, grown on and produced rather a nice black cherry tomato plant, and it's laden with tomatoes that are now ripening up, as you can see. So this may be the very last plant in here when all the others have been removed. So that's quite good really. I might bury a few tomatoes around the edge of the greenhouse floor in future, just to get a late second crop. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing, and I hope you found that discussion on the no-dig plot useful. If you're starting out and you've not done it before, I would highly recommend the approach. You don't have to do the lasagna bed approach. You can simply do no-dig, cover with cardboard and manure or compost. But whatever you do, if you follow that line of no-dig, you'll end up with a much easier to maintain plot. Okay, anyway, enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you again soon. Okay, all the best. Cheers, bye.